to episode 2 of the Lumi Knits podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today. My name's Hayley. I'm from Central Victoria in Australia. I'm a knitter and a sewist, and I love to make things and tell you all about them. Thanks so much to everyone who watched and liked and subscribed and commented on episode 1 of my podcast. I was really surprised because I didn't expect anyone except my mum to watch it. So thank you very much. I'm going to try and answer some of the questions that I had in the comments about my Hinterland dress later on in the podcast. And I hope you enjoy what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to get straight into it. I think I'll talk about the knitting. Now, this is actually the second time that I've tried to film this podcast. If you watch my first podcast, you'll know that I've been moving house, so it's been hectic. But now we're in our nice new house and I've got my own office where I work and sew and knit. So hopefully things are starting to come together a little bit and I can be a bit more consistent and not leave so long between episodes. I did mention a couple of the projects I've been working on in the last episode, but if you didn't watch, I'm just going to go and talk about them again anyway. I've been working on a Penguino cardigan for a soon-to-be-born niece or nephew. This has been a real love-hate project. I loved it at first, and then I hated it, and I thought I was going to pull it out, and then I realised there's no point in pulling it out because it's made from sort of bits and pieces of yarn, and I wouldn't be able to do anything with them anyway, so I decided to persevere. But I want to share with you where I'm up to today. I'm sort of starting to come back to the love side of it. So Pengweeno is a pattern by Stephen West. It's the small version of the Penguono, which I'm also knitting, but I can't knit it when the weather's not freezing cold because it's huge. I've made it really, really big, and the only place I can really comfortably knit it is in bed because it's literally enormous. And one day I'll show it to you, but probably not today because I couldn't hold it up in front of the camera. So you'll just have to make do with the Penguino instead. Now, officially, I don't know if the baby is a boy or a girl. I do have my suspicions, but I decided that I would make this Pengweeno in a very neutral palette. I was super into the ocean at the time, and I was doing a lot of work around the ocean with my job and thinking a lot about it because we've moved from a coastal area to an inland area. So I've sort of gone with an oceany theme for it. This is where I'm at. So this is the front of the little cardigan. It sort of crosses over. I've done one side of the sleeve, and I'm just working on the other. One of the really cool things about the Penguono and the Pengweeno pattern is the welts at the back. They just look great, I think, although I am concerned about a baby lying on it and being uncomfortable, but I don't think the baby will be able to wear it for too long at a time because it will be very, very warm. I've knit this most of the time with 2 strands of 8-ply or DK held double, and if I did use 4-ply or fingering weight, I held 3. There's one section on the back where it's a bit thin, but it's fine, and I'm knitting this on 5mm needles. So it's starting to come together. I'm going to have so many ends to weave in. So I think that's going to be like a movie and weaving time. But like I said, I'm really starting to enjoy knitting this again after a not very enjoyable knitting time. So hopefully I keep enjoying it and I can come up with something. The baby's due in 3 or 4 weeks, so I really have to make sure I'm focusing on that. The next thing that I wanted to show you was my Felix cardigan. I was happily knitting away on this, and then I got a bit paralysed because casting off is really not my forte. I have tried doing a bound cast off, a sewn cast off, a tubular one, and I just find it really hard. I always lose track of where I'm up to, and the result isn't usually worth the stress. So I tend to just bind off in pattern. And I was going back and forth with that, whether I should try the tubular bind off again. I think it's called the tubular bind off. I'll reference it underneath. And in the end, I decided just to bind off in pattern. It wasn't until I bound off in pattern, decided I was pretty happy with it, and then read the instructions to pick up the sleeves that I realised I'd done the ribbing a size too large, but I'm just going to have to deal with that. I don't think it'll be too much of a problem. The fabric looks fine. It's not overstretched because I did bind off in pattern. It's a little firmer. But nevertheless, I'm going to show you where I'm at with that now. It's gotten far too big for me to do a whole lot with. I can't keep it in my yarn bowl anymore. Here we've got the beautiful lacework on the raglan coming down here. This is my large ribbing and my bind off in pattern. I think it looks fine. I don't think it really needs to have that tubular bind off. I'm not going to be looking at the hem going, oh my gosh, I should have done a sewn bind off. I'll just be too busy doing what I like to do and being nice and cozy and warm. So as I said, it's big. I like my garments tend to be a bit oversized and comfortable, and this garment's just knitted up so beautifully. It's very squishy, very soft, very comfortable, and I've just gotten started on the sleeve here. The problem that I'm going to have with this sleeve is that because I'm knitting this on 6mm needles, you can't really get 9.5-inch circulars here in Australia. I'd have to get them from overseas, and it will cost a lot in postage and the actual needles themselves. So I have to magic loop, and I'm not a real big fan of magic looping, so this will probably take me a while. I'll procrastinate on this. I could use DPNs, but I'm kind of scared of those as well. So I'll just magic loop, and I'll magic loop slowly. Haven't cast on anything new recently, and that's because I've been so busy with the move. I do really want to cast on something that's very basic and very repetitive. Just stocking it in the round I think would be nice. Maybe some socks. Maybe I should just pick up some socks that I've already started and haven't finished. I'm not sure. I've got a list of things I want to make. On my shelf behind me, I've got everything ordered in the projects that I want to do. There's the Junction sweater by Andrea Mowry from Renee Knits. A wrap from Two of Wands, I think. And then there's the jumper that I'm going to knit for my son. But I sort of feel like doing just some small knits, some small projects. We'll see how I go. I'm only starting to get a little bit of free time lately over the last probably 2 days. So I'm not going to jump into anything too quickly because I don't know how long that'll last. I think I'm going to move on now to the sewing. Like I said in the intro, a lot of people have been asking me about my Hinterland dress, and I've tried to arrange it nicely so it's hung up on the wall beside me. I've got no idea if this is actually in frame or not, so I might just pause here and go and check and make sure it's in frame and then talk a little more about it. I used just a very basic chambray from Spotlight, which is just a big box store here in Australia. It's nothing fancy, but it washes up really nicely. It's very soft and comfortable to wear. I'll talk a little bit about the modifications that I did. I lengthened the bodice by 1.5 inches, I'd like to say. And I did that just because I'm a bit longer in the torso and I don't really like the waist sitting up super high. This gives me plenty of room. It hits me sort of around that natural waist area. I also didn't do the buttons and the placket, and that's because I am terrified of the idea of doing buttons. So all I did was I folded the bodice, I placed the bodice piece of the pattern on the fold and just cut it. Instead of doing 2 separate bodice pieces, I just did one, and I didn't have to worry about the band for the buttons or anything like that. I hope this makes sense. The other modification that I made was I don't like wasting fabric. I don't like cutting out rectangles and having rectangular pieces left over. So instead of cutting out the pattern pieces to the size that the pattern gave, all I did was I just cut the 2 rectangles with the remaining fabric, which allowed me to make it a little wider and a fair bit longer. So that dress hits me about mid-calf, but I really like that. It's a really comfortable length for me. It means that I can sort of, get down and play with the kids and, go about my day and not worry that it's too short or riding up too high. It's also not so low that it catches on things. So So I actually lucked out and got a really great length. One of the things I love about all Sew Liberated patterns are how deep the pockets are. They're not little pockets that, you know, things fall out of. They're deep pockets and you can really put your phone or your keys or whatever in there and not worry that you're going to lose them. So I really am very happy with this Hinterland dress. I haven't made another one yet, and I'll talk about why a little bit further on, but I might even just show this dress a bit better. So you can see it will fit pretty much just around here on me, very comfortable. The pockets, I can get my whole hand in there, which I love. The finish on the neckline is beautiful. It's not bias bound, it's a facing, but it sort of looks a bit like a binding, and I overlocked the inside seams. Sometimes I like to play around with Frenching the seams, but I decided not to do that with this one because I really just wanted to, oh, lost my pin. I really just wanted to mess around and get a dress that I was happy with, and then I'll refine it from there. So that's my Hinterland. If you've got any questions, just pop them in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. I'm a forever beginner sewer. I will never put myself at anything above that because I just can't. I'm just a beginner and I just follow the pattern instructions and I read lots of hacks, and So Liberated does amazing tutorial videos, which I'll talk more about in a moment. So I'm happy to help if I can, but I'm not a very technical sewist. I have no training, self-taught. I'm happy to help if I can. So with all that being said and lots of teasers and spoilers in there, I want to show you my Otis Overalls. The Otis Overalls were an absolute joy to sew. I really, really loved the pattern, and I really loved the finished product, the garment itself. It's something I thought I wouldn't wear. I thought it would be a wearable muslin in that I would wear it maybe in the garden until it got muddy and then, I don't know, do something else with the fabric. But they came out so well, even with the mistakes that I made, that I wear them a lot. Like I've been wearing them probably most days, I'd say. They're very comfortable, very practical. Again, the beautiful deep pockets. They're fantastic. And they've even made me really like a fabric that I didn't actually like, which is why I used it in the first place, just to try and use it up, and so it didn't go to waste. So without further ado, I will show you my Otis Overalls, and then I'll talk a little bit about the modifications and things that I made. So there they are. I'm not sure if you can see the lantern cuffs, but there are lantern cuffs. They're cool. I like that it's not just a sort of flopping out cuff at the bottom. I didn't do the kangaroo pocket at the front just because I don't like them. Beautiful deep pockets again. Oh, over here you can really get your hand in there deeply. One of the mistakes that I made, and it's actually quite comical, on the back pockets I didn't line up the notches properly. So instead of lining up the bottom of the pocket with the notch, I lined up the top, which means the pockets sit kind of mid-thigh on me. And my husband says I look like an 80s rapper, but I don't really care. I'm not going to take them off because I think it gives them a lot of character. And I think probably next time I make the Otis Overalls, I won't even bother putting a back pocket on. I will just, not just like I won't put on a front pocket. The side pockets are plenty enough for me. The back of the Otis Overalls has got a really great detail in the waist ties. It lets you get a lot of shape into the overall, and it doesn't, it's not prohibitive. It doesn't get in your way. It just gives some shape to an overall, but still keeps it really comfortable and gives it a bit of interest as well. When I do these again, actually, I'm going to go back and I'll talk about the modification. The only modification I made other than leaving off the kangaroo pocket. Is it a kangaroo pocket? Just a front pocket. I'll call it a kangaroo pocket, but it's not really. The front pocket. The only modification I made other than leaving off the front pocket was to lengthen the leg by 1.5 inches, and I'm glad I did that because it hits me kind of just above the ankle. I'm slightly taller than what it's designed for. I'm about 5'7" and it's designed for 5'5". So I added 1.5 inches to the leg length, and I'm really glad I did that because otherwise it would sort of be coming up my calf a little bit and wouldn't give me a lot of length, and I'm sort of not into that mid-calf thing in an overall. Happy for it in a dress, but not with pants. It's just not my thing. So that's the only modification I made, and I will do that again in the future. I may even go 2 inches instead of 1.5. Overall, I really, really enjoyed this. I'm sure I said that before, but the tutorial videos that go with it are sensational. There's also a recommended workflow for doing this in a sort of slow and mindful step-by-step way. I think if I had have raced through this pattern, which is something that I am inclined to do when I sew, I wouldn't have enjoyed it, and I would have come out with a fairly crappy end product. There was a few things that I had to unpick and redo, but it was all user error. There was nothing in the instructions or in the pattern that wasn't perfect. So really happy with the pattern overall, and I think it's really enhanced my ability as a beginner sewist, because it's really shown me that when I slow down and really focus in on what I'm doing, I can do a great job on something. So the tutorial video is excellent. The part that I was dreading the most was the hand stitching of the front facing, and it actually turned out to be the part that I enjoyed the most. So don't try and skip the hand stitching of the lining of the bib. It's really worth it to do it well. I tried to do it with a sewing machine and it didn't work at all. I resigned myself to hand stitching it, and when I sat down and did it, I absolutely loved it, and I loved the finish that I got. I think in the last podcast I mentioned I was doing the Wayfarer Slippers. I made a pair of Wayfarer Slippers for my daughter and a pair of Wayfarer Slippers for my son. But again, this was when I was a rushy sewist and I didn't read the instructions properly, so I made them far too small. So my daughter ended up with my son's pair, and my daughter's pair will have to go to my niece because they just came out far too small. My son was quite disgruntled, so I've cut out a pair in the correct size for him. The pattern itself was great, easy to sew, easy to follow, really just a really nice pattern. So I really recommend that one. And that's all the sewing I've been doing lately. I do plan on sewing probably another 5 pairs of Otis Overalls. I've really got my heart set on a pair of mustard corduroy ones, and I think I might try and make a pair that match for my daughter as well, because she's desperate for some overalls. But that's been pretty much it. The last month, as I said, has been completely hectic with moving house and lots of change here, but things are starting to settle now, and I'm hoping that I can get a lot more sewing and knitting done and tell you all about it. So thanks so much for sitting through and listening to what I've got to say. If you've got any questions or any comments, please pop them in. More than happy to get your feedback. Hopefully I didn't speak too quickly. I do tend to do that. And I think I'm going to have to edit some parts. I'm probably going to edit that. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me. I hope wherever you are, you're having a wonderful day, and hope to see you again on the next episode.